Hello, Sooner Nation, OU Insider subscribers, Coach Brian Clinton enthusiasts, people who are absolutely thrilled and excited that the Oklahoma Sooners, the Sooners of Oklahoma, are now in the Southeastern Conference officially as of Monday. This is the podcast for you. This is another episode of the Oklahoma Drill, a podcast fueled by OU Insider and the Rivals Network. I am joined as always by SEC Brian Clinton. Brian, this is our first pod since OU officially joined the SEC, and I think there's no better way to roll that out than to point out the new backdrop behind you. Tell us a little bit about that.
I was talking with, I believe it was Parker who I brought it up with first, and said, hey, I've had this little Rydell Mini Oklahoma helmet for quite some time. I think it'd be kind of cool to get all of the SEC teams. And I found a deal originally. This is just ridiculous. Originally, it was going to be like $500 to get all of them, which is just nuts. But I found a deal. It was kind of like an SEC day. It almost, I don't know. It was kind of like an SEC expansion day deal. And I was like, got it, doing it. And they got here just in time for us to record. So I like it. I'm excited about it. It looks fancy. So I'm excited about that.
You'll be able to do some fun stuff during the season with those, right?
That's the plan.
So I remember, this is funny, I didn't actually tell you this, but I remember when I was very young, growing up as a huge OU football fan, and this was in the days when Nebraska, A&M, Colorado, Missouri were still in the Big 12. And I remember went to in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, shout out the Illinois River, anybody around there. There's a Hibbett's Sports in town, or at least there was. I don't know if there still is, but I remember we were in Hibbett's, and there was this package of like the tiniest cheap plastic helmets, like $10.
Yep.
Every team's helmet, and I bought them, or I had my mom buy them or something, and I set them up on my dresser at home. These little bitty, like, I don't know, 2-inch tall, 3-inch tall. Yeah. Little plastic helmets, and I was so proud of them. I think yours are probably a slight step up from those helmets.
I couldn't afford the real ones. I think Rydell speed helmets are like $500 a piece now, so that wasn't happening. But this will do. I'm happy about it. It looks good.
It does. And to further commiserate. I don't know words. To further celebrate OU being in the SEC, we thought, I had this harebrained idea. Everybody's doing SEC power rankings because as of now, we're about a month away from the start of fall camp. We're a little less than 2 weeks out from SEC Media Days, which is just insanity. And the fact that softball, other sports as of right now are mostly quiet. If Niger Kennedy commits while we're doing this or tomorrow, then I'll take the L, but I don't think I think we're still waiting out for that. So figured, Brian, might as well have a little bit of fun and not just do SEC power rankings, but do a little bit of a draft the power rankings. Now, you won the coin toss thanks to Siri on your phone, so you get to pick first. So you're going to pick, then I'm going to pick, and we're going to do our power rankings that way. And we've got 16 teams to go through, Brian. Some teams that are more worthy of discussion than others, but we're going to go through all 16 teams. And I think most people are going to know who number one is. And I think most people are going to wonder, where do you and I have Texas and Oklahoma? And who gets those picks first? So Brian, we got 16 teams. OU and Texas are in the SEC. I'm going to cede the floor to you. You have the first pick in the Oklahoma Drill SEC Power Rankings draft. Take it away. Who do you got?
I'll go. I'm taking Georgia with the first pick.
Bold.
Yeah.
Bold take.
Real easy one. I mean, This is probably one of the I expect them to be a favorite most of the year. They're actually not my national title pick. If I was
Ooh.
to be completely honest, that
Who's it?
team
Wait.
that team resides in the Big Ten.
Ooh.
But I do think Georgia is probably one of the two teams that if I had to put money on it, they would be one of the two teams in the title game. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about the insane amount of hype that Carson Beck is getting. Like I do understand how good he looked at times last year, and another year obviously is going to be um, good for him. But he's like sweeping the first team All American uh, boards pretty much. Like that's everybody's taking him as the best quarterback in the nation. I don't really have a problem with that. It just kind of surprises me a little bit. I'm pretty high on Jalen Milrow. Um, I just like some of the things that we saw from him last year. I think he's probably going to really benefit from having Kalen DeBoer there in Tuscaloosa. So, but yeah, I mean, it's Georgia. Kirby Smart has the best roster in college football. They only got probably even better this year with some of the additions they made. I think I'm trying to remember the running back out of Florida that they added on top of who they already had. So Trevor Etienne is the
Mm-hmm.
name there.
Mm-hmm.
Got my
Mm-hmm.
trusty Phil Steele down here. Um, but yeah, I really like Georgia. Think they are probably the SEC favorite and pretty easy pick at number one.
There, look, hot take, Brian, just scorching right off the board. No, look, Georgia is the favorite coming into this season. And if there's one positive in an OU schedule filled with just tough team after tough team, if there's one silver lining, it's that Oklahoma doesn't have to play Georgia. But I think that's about it. And there's not a super marquee non-conference opponent. Although I think Tulane and Houston could be sneakily sneaky.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't play Georgia. That's about it. And I agree with you. And look, uh, it's becoming rosters year to year, the activity in the transfer portal, it's becoming more difficult to predict. But this is a Georgia team that I think rightfully believed it should have been in the playoff last year. You think Kirby Smart's going to have that team ready to play, ready to win the SEC, especially now with OU and Texas on board?
Yeah.
I think so. I think so. Anything to and I mean, and look, and like you mentioned, I don't know what to think about Carson Beck either. I mean, I think there are some people out there that think he's going to be the best quarterback in the Big 12 or in the Big 12, excuse me, in the SEC. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Um,
But they've got a ton of talent on both sides of the ball. Another incredible recruiting class coming in. They're an easy pick. Is there anything else to mention about Georgia?
yeah, I just the funny thing about it, perception's everything. If Texas was to have had Georgia's schedule, or really anybody not named Georgia, I think this would be in a lot more noise.
Mm-hmm.
Play, they open up the season against Clemson. Their first two games in SEC play are on the road. They go to Kentucky, have a bye week, and then they're at Alabama. They go to Texas, obviously play Florida and Jacksonville. Then they go to Ole Miss, and they've got Tennessee on the schedule too. So pretty tough, but it's Georgia. So there's not a whole lot of noise there because they should be able to handle that.
No, look, and I'm glad you mentioned the schedule there, and that is something that hasn't been talked about a lot. And I think the schedule is going to be a big part of my next pick, Brian, because I get the number 2 pick in the draft, and I'm going to make some Oklahoma fans unhappy, I think. But again, we're starting off with two not super hot takes, but I'm going to go with the Texas Longhorns out of Austin, Brian. There's a couple of things here, and they're obvious. I'm not breaking ground with what I'm about to say, but this is a team that's coming off a college football playoff appearance. I think Look, they didn't win, but I mean, I think it was clear they could have won that game. They could have made the national title. They were one of the four best teams in the country last year. They earned their right to be there. They've got a ton of players coming back, and obviously you've got Quinn Ewers, who's now not only, I mean, he's going to have Heisman buzz. He just is. Now, whether he is that good, Quinn Ewers is a good quarterback. Is he an elite quarterback? We can get into that in a second. Regardless, he's a very experienced quarterback. That's just huge. And again, a much different position that OU finds itself in. I look at the roster, they return really key guys on offense. I think Texas is going to have an argument for the best offensive line in the conference. I think that's an easy argument. Defensively, they've got some spots. And actually, there's a podcast that I've recorded with Jason Sukumel from Orange Bloods that hasn't published yet, but he talks a little bit about this. There's a couple of questions about the defense, specifically the defensive line, that interior. I think that's going to be something to monitor. They're having to replace both safeties, although adding Andrew Makuba out of Clemson probably definitely helps in that regard a little bit. But I think, and I mean, so I think they're going to have talent to go up against anybody. But I think the most important part of this, Brian, is their schedule, specifically their SEC schedule. Yes, they've got to go to Michigan, and that is a hell of a week 2 game. That's going to be probably the marquee non-conference matchup in all of college football this year. That's a huge game. They do play Georgia. Those are 2 really, really tough games. But Brian, you look at the rest of their schedule. I mean, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky. I mean, their tough games are Michigan, Oklahoma, Georgia, and A&M. I mean, that's the rest of their schedules against teams that are likely going to be at the bottom of the SEC. So, I mean, I think a path is absolutely there for Texas to make the SEC title game and make the playoff. Do you have qualms? Do you have a counter? What say you?
No, not. I mean, I think that there is justification to take Texas there. I had them at, well, with schedule as part of the criteria, I had them at number 2 as well. Top to bottom, which this is probably going to be something of a hot take, I had them at 5.
Ooh.
So that
Ooh.
would be teams that I would take, top to bottom on a neutral field. But reason being, the defensive line, as you said, one of the reasons Texas was so dominant last year was they had the best interior defensive line in the country. You couldn't run on Texas. And I think that played a really big factor in their success. Quinn Ewers, as you said, is a good quarterback.
He's a good quarterback.
But I here's the deal, and maybe my raising has given me the wrong colored glasses to look at Texas objectively. I don't think that it has. I think I've been doing this long enough that I can say, with what they had at wide receiver last year, you had 2 guys that went in the first round, and Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy. Their offense should have been more prolific than it was through the air, if Quinn Ewers lives up to the hype. Now, this is going to be a big year for him. He's had a lot of time with Steve Sarkisian to get things figured out. Steve Sarkisian might just be the best play caller in the country, not named Muleshoe. So I think that the offense is going to be there. I think that they've got plenty of talent. I think they'll be really, really good. What does somewhat concern me a little bit about Texas is, even under Steve Sarkisian, so last year, there were a few instances where they kind of got caught playing with their food and nearly had some games bite them.
Yeah.
And
Houston.
yeah, I mean, that's a perfect example. Now, Oklahoma does that from time to time as well. I do like the mentality or the kind of I like how the expectations, if you're an Oklahoma fan, I love how the expectations for Texas are here, and then Oklahoma's like barely on the radar right now. I do think you have to like that. But the games for Texas that scare me, if I'm the Longhorns, as you mentioned, you got to go to Ann Arbor. I think that game, I don't think Michigan's going to be what they were obviously last year, but I do think they're still going to be a very good team. You're playing on the road in the big house. Obviously, against Oklahoma is going to be tough. Georgia, those games back to back with no buys, that's pretty tough. Um, A&M to end the year, but I also think that the Florida game on November 9th, even though it's in DKR, I do think that one's a little bit tricky because Florida does have good athletes. I think at this point in the year, you know, Billy Napier they've probably had it pretty tough up to that point. So I think they'll be playing with everything to lose. And so I think that game could be a little tricky. But yeah, the schedule sets up really well for Texas to make their second straight college football playoff. So I don't disagree with that pick at all.
No, and I mean, this is a huge year for Texas, and that was one of the things that Jason Sukumel said on my
Yeah.
podcast with him that'll be published here in a day or two. I think if Texas doesn't make the playoff, it's a disappointment. I mean, with a 12-team playoff,
Yeah.
I think it's very possible that 9-3 gets you into the playoff
Oh yeah.
if you're in the SEC. That should be the expectation for Texas. And now, and I want to say again how important scheduling plays a part of these rankings. If Texas had Oklahoma's schedule, I'd probably feel a little differently.
Yep.
I just would.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, for me, Oklahoma, if Oklahoma had Texas' schedule, I think they may have been in that conversation to go number two.
Yeah.
I mean, at least in my eyes. So,
I think that's fair. And but again, when we mentioned that they're going to have stability in a lot of places on offense,
yeah.
I mean, look, they've got another top 5 recruiting class.
Yep.
Really excited to see. I mean, what does Isaiah Bond out of Bama do for them at wide receiver?
Yep.
Is he going to be a difference maker?
Yep.
I'm this has to do, yes, with talent and continuity and consistency and all that stuff, but this really has to do with their schedule. The path is there for them
Yep.
to immediately make an impact in the SEC. It just is.
Agreed.
You've got, and I should also point out that Texas, these aren't hot takes because Georgia and Texas largely are the two betting favorites.
Yeah.
Atop the SEC going into the year. I think both their over unders. Are they 10.5? I think both of them.
Yes. Yes. That's
yeah,
correct.
Texas. Yeah, they're both 10. Yeah. So there we go. Brian, this is when things could maybe it's another pick from now, but number 3, I think this is when things could get really interesting. You've got the third pick. Take it away.
I'm taking Alabama.
Ooh, that is
taking it.
not who I had
Yeah.
at number 3. Okay.
I'm taking Alabama.
We've got our first disagreement.
So
Okay.
this one was a little tough. There was actually there was one other team in contention for me. Um,
I'm probably going to pick that other team for
you
4th, but go
probably
ahead.
are. The thing with Bama is I understand that they lost quite a bit in the portal. Caleb Downs isn't there. That's huge. And it's a new system, new coaching staff, new everything. But the cupboards weren't left bare at all. Um, they still got plenty of talent there. The schedule is tough. But here's the thing. I really like what Alabama returns, particularly having who I believe is going to probably be the best quarterback in the
Yeah.
SEC this year. So I think with that being said, You've got a really good offensive line in front of him, what should be a good offensive line. Um, and Jalen Milroe, I just think carries them a long way in this one. They've got a lot of talent, obviously on the defensive side of the ball as well, and they do have to play Georgia, but it's in Tuscaloosa, so uh, the schedule being tough, it kind of makes this one a little bit wishy-washy for me. But at the same time, I really like what I saw from Kalen DeBoer offensively at Washington. I love what he did there, and I think that he's got the pieces to just keep things rolling in Tuscaloosa this year. So Bama at 2 for me was not the easiest pick, but it makes a lot of sense.
No, look, I mean I had them at 4. So I definitely, I mean I get it. And I think when you look at, I mean, look, despite Nick Saban leaving, this is a top 3 recruiting class
Yep.
coming in. And their transfer portal class might be the best in the country with all the guys that they're bringing in. And you can't overstate, again, it's the Quinn Ewers thing. We can debate about how elite Quinn Ewers actually is. He's a good quarterback that has a lot of experience. Jalen Milroe coming back is a huge deal. It's a huge deal.
Yep.
And Alabama's going to have, they're still going to be physical. They're going to have the talent. It's very possible they have the most talent in the league, maybe outside of Georgia. Or that's there's certainly gonna be that argument for that. I think the only thing that makes it, and actually I'm gonna, so I asked VIP members over at OU Insider for hot takes about the SEC for a mailbag I'm gonna do later. A couple people brought up DeBoer. I think that's a really interesting conversation to have because I want to ask you, I think it would be very reasonable if, despite the talent that they do have coming in, some of the continuity, all that stuff, what if they go 8-4? Because as much talent as they have coming in the door and as good of a coach as DeBoer is, this is a huge change.
Yep.
It's a massive change. It's a really tough schedule. I mean, look, they go to Wisconsin, which is, they'll probably be favored in that game, but they go to Wisconsin in week 3. Yeah. I mean, they've got Georgia, they've got Tennessee, they've got Missouri, they've got LSU, they've got OU. What if they go 8-4? How much of an appetite is there for the possibility of a good, not great season? Now, you could tell me Alabama goes 11-1 and wins the SEC, and that wouldn't shock me
Yeah.
at all. But what if they go 8-4? How much of a leash do you think DeBoer has? Is that something even interesting to talk about? Is that just grasping at straw? Not saying he would be fired.
No, not at all. So I think the perception nationally, if Alabama goes 8-4, is it kind of like writes itself. It's the Nick Saban era is over. Alabama's crashing and burning. You know, Alabama fans are getting their pitchforks sharpened and like ready to storm the gates there. Um, but I don't think that's actually the reality. I don't think, I mean, if there is an athletic department or, yeah, just a football program that's got things figured out in the country, I would say it's probably Alabama. They've done things right for a long, long time. Um, and even with Nick Saban gone, I do like the staff that DeBoer has around him there. So if they go 8-4, I mean, when you look at the back end of the schedule, I mean, their last 3 road games are at OU, at LSU, or sorry, at Tennessee, at LSU, and at Oklahoma. Like that's tough. Like those are 3 really tough places to go and play on the road. So I don't think it's out of the question at all that they could go 8-4. But I think this is why I think it wouldn't be as big of a deal as it may have been in the past. I think the days of us seeing an 11-1 or 12-0 SEC champion or like SEC first seed going into the championship game is probably over.
I agree.
It's just the conferences at this point are just they're getting ridiculously deep. I mean, think of just using this visual behind us. Like look at some of the teams that are having to share a conference now. And you're Georgia and you have to play Alabama and Texas and Tennessee and Florida all like it's just really tough now. So you add to that there is East-West crossover now. There's no divisions. It's just going to be really tough for teams to go, you know, 11-1 or 12-0. I think a 10-2, I think a team if you had Alabama or Georgia coming out of the SEC at 10-2, Um, I think they're probably right there in the discussion to be the number one overall seed in the playoff if they were to win an SEC championship. I think that's where we're headed. Not quite to the NFL model where you've got, you know, a 17 game season and 5 losses is fine, but I do think you're going to start noticing 2 losses, 3 losses isn't nearly as big of a deal as it used to be.
I've got the number 4 pick, Brian, and I'm likely going to pick the team that we probably got 3 and 4 flipped. So, right, we've got Georgia, Texas, Alabama off the board. I'm going to go Ole Miss.
Yep.
I think Ole Miss has just got to be the team here. They went 11-2 last year. Fantastic season for them last year. Just fantastic season. And couple of different factors at play. One, doing some research for this, dude, 70% of their production on both sides of the ball is coming back from last year. You go through the guys they added through the portal, and they added 24 guys in the portal. You go through who they added. I mean, Henry Parrish from Miami, running back, Logan Diggs, a running back from LSU, Brandon Turnage, a cornerback from Tennessee, Amorian Walker, a cornerback from Michigan. They added some offensive linemen from Washington. You combine all of that with the fact that, I mean, if you've looked at their schedule, they play Georgia, that's tough.
Yep.
They play Oklahoma, that's tough. But they get both those games at home. And the only other really noteworthy game on their schedule, Brian, is at LSU in early October. But they host Kentucky. Their non-conference schedule is nothing. Yeah. They host Kentucky. They go to South Carolina. They go to Arkansas. They go to Florida. They host Mississippi State. I mean, I was actually surprised at the amount of people on our board. Not surprised, but there are a lot of people on our board that think Ole Miss is making the SEC title game. And the more I started digging into it, I was like, yeah, very possible. And if you're talking about games that you should not assume Oklahoma is just going to win in the SEC, it's going to Ole Miss. That could end up easily being the toughest game on OU schedule this season. I don't know if that's a hot take. I know they go to LSU. I know they have to play Texas. I know they've got to play Bama, but they have to go to Ole Miss. And if Ole Miss lives up to its potential, that could be the toughest game on OU schedule. This is a top 10 team that went 11-2 last year that has maybe more continuity than almost any other team in the SEC. I think Ole Miss is not even a dark horse. I mean, I think they're 3rd and 4th in most of the betting odds to make it. But Brian, if Ole Miss is playing for the SEC title game in December, that's not going to shock me at all. Anything to add on Ole Miss?
Yeah. So last year, and I'm cheating from a preview magazine a little bit here, but it's interesting. Ole Miss was plus 11 in turnovers last year. And they were also 4-0 in one-score games. They were 2-2 in one-score games the year before. So, history suggests that will fall back towards the median there, and they might be in line to maybe drop a game or two. But the thing that has not been shown in history is whenever you go out and grab a guy like Walter Nolan, Princely. I'm going to try this again. Princely Uman, I believe is how you say his last name. Was one of the best pass rushers in the SEC last year. He's now on staff or on the I I'm pretty much on staff now, I guess. That's where we're at in college football at this point. Yeah, this Ole Miss team's going to be tough. I do think that trip to Oxford is Oklahoma's most difficult game next year. Um, the combination of how good I expect them to be with it being on the road, yeah, I think that one's going to be really tough. So, um, that's exactly who I had. That's who I was debating back and forth between them and Bama. Uh, I think there's an argument for either one of them right there. So that's yeah, I feel pretty good about that.
Top four picks are off the board: Georgia, Texas, Bama, Ole Miss. You've got the fifth pick, Brian. Still a lot of tantalizing teams on the board, including the team that we cover.
Yeah,
Who are
and
you going with the
that's
number fifth pick?
that's probably where I'm gonna start getting a lot of the Homer takes in on the YouTube channel here because that is my third pick. I'm taking Oklahoma at 5.
Let's go. There it is.
I'm taking
Oklahoma
OU.
off the board.
So
Make the case.
here's the thing. The teams that are in contention here are Oklahoma, LSU, Missouri, and Tennessee. Like those are the four. Um, I think that the biggest difference between Oklahoma and the rest of those, at least in my opinion, is I think the defense at Oklahoma has a chance to be legitimately dominant next year. I really like what Oklahoma returns defensively. Um, I do know that Missouri probably has the most veteran uh, quarterback of the group, but when you look at what Oklahoma's got coming back on offense around Jackson Arnold, even if you are looking at the offensive line with some question marks, I do.
Apologize. We had some technical difficulties in the most anticipated part of the podcast, of course, on Brian's end. Definitely not on mine. Weren't on my end. They were on Brian's end. Brian, you were in the middle of taking your third pick in the power rankings draft, the fifth pick overall, the Oklahoma Sooners. Make your case again.
So Oklahoma, LSU, Tennessee, and Missouri were the four teams in contention for this spot. I think this is where things, for me at least, get a little like this is where I would start to draw that line, I guess, for the second tier, if there is one right now in the
Yeah.
SEC. I think that those first four are set up really well to have success, whether it be because of the schedule or, um, just with what they have returning. But Oklahoma is the best of those next teams because I think the defense for the Sooners of those four teams has the opportunity to be special. I don't think that's the case for LSU, for Tennessee, or for Missouri. I know Missouri returned some pieces there. They lost their defensive coordinator to LSU. LSU wasn't able to get who they needed to on the defensive line, and is still going to have some issues there. Tennessee, probably of those other three, is going to be a little bit better defensively, but outside of Pierce, I think that or outside of the front seven, I think they could have some issues in the secondary. So I think Oklahoma's defense is what gives them the edge there. I also am putting a lot of trust in Bill Bedenbaugh, and I don't really feel too bad about it. I like the fact that he's got the guys that he's wanted out of the transfer portal. And the big thing is, and this is kind of just something that a lot of people didn't realize. Oklahoma as a group, that offensive line, they've got 125 starts combined amongst them. That's better than Georgia. That's better than Texas. That's better. It's like 2 games better than Texas. Um, and I think it's even better than what Alabama has coming back. So when you look at that, really like where they're sitting defensively. I think offensively, if the offensive line is just good, if it's just good, then Oklahoma offensively could be stellar. They might have the best wide receiver group in the country. Um, the running back room is deep. You've got Taylor Tatum coming in, who I did a video on this last week. He's going to be incredible. I think he could be somebody that contributes right away. I really like the upside for Oklahoma. And the other thing that just feels good about this team right now is those seasons that Oklahoma has been the most fun to watch. It has been when the expectations are kind of just like not there. Um, maybe I think it's a cultural thing. Like I think that's just around here, around this state, the blue collar mentality and that just combine and it's a really positive thing. So I like where Oklahoma's at. I'm taking them with my third pick. I feel pretty good about it.
Love the pick. I've said this a couple of times. Look, Oklahoma can win the SEC.
Yep.
They can win the SEC. There's a couple of things that are working against them to do that. One is this incredibly difficult schedule.
Yep.
And I'm going to say this in my mailbag on OU Insider that I think I'm going to publish tomorrow. If OU wins 10 games in a regular season, that is a massive achievement.
Oh, yeah.
That is, I mean, one of the best achievements from this program in modern memory. If OU wins 10 games.
Yeah, you're the 5 seed. You don't like you're the 5 seed if you win 10 games if you're Oklahoma. Like that, yeah. I think pretty easily. You're the top at large if you win 10 games.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, because I'm going through it. I'm like, man, if you only lose 2 games, you're assuming you're only losing to 2 of the following teams: Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss, Missouri, Tennessee, LSU, Auburn. I mean, and that 3-game gauntlet to end the regular season at Missouri, Bama, at LSU, you're going to be hard pressed to find a more difficult 3-game schedule on anybody, or 3-game slate on any team's schedule, and it's at the very end of the year.
Yeah.
If OU goes 2 out of 3 in those games, that's a massive accomplishment.
Yep.
Huge accomplishment. That's not saying they can't do it, but if there's 2 things that are going to keep them from winning the SEC, it's that, and it's the offensive line, as you mentioned, which is experienced, and I'm glad you pointed out their combined starts. This is not some inexperienced group as a whole that has never been on the field. The thing is, it's a patchwork group full of guys that have never really played on the field together, with some veterans, with some young guys. That's a huge question mark to have going into the SEC, and you're putting a lot on the shoulders of Jackson Arnold as a true sophomore quarterback with 1 start under his belt. A start that was mixed, some really good moments and some bad moments, because he's a freshman that was working with a new offensive coordinator against a good Arizona team with like 3 weeks of prep. Jackson Arnold could be the best quarterback in the SEC this year. He could be. He could also be middle of the pack with some good moments and some bad moments. And that offensive line is going to be a big part of that. But you mentioned it. This wide receiver group might be the best in the SEC. And then you look at the linebacker group, you look at the secondary, there's a lot of areas, running back, a lot of areas to be excited about. I think it's Jackson Arnold. How good is he really? Because I think to really contend in the SEC, Jackson Arnold has to be above average. I don't even think that's a question. The offensive line needs to be good, and I'm curious about that defensive line. Now or the interior specifically, that's when Dominic Williams, adding him is just massive.
Yep. That might be a 1 or 2 game swing addition. Like if it comes down to it, that literally could make their season.
It might, yeah. And then, but you're going to need Grayson Halton to pop off. Like you're going to need John Terry to pop off. You're going to need David Stone to pop off. You're going to need somebody else to be like a playmaker. That's what you're going to need.
Yep. You need
I was asked to make an official prediction for OU's season, and I think my official prediction, I reserve the right to change this because we're still 2 months away from the season, but I think I'm going to say 9-3. And I think, you know what? If they go 9-3, that's a great year.
Yep. You might be, I mean, you're in contention for a playoff spot
Yep.
at 9-3. I mean, and that's not really a hot take. You go 9-3 with that schedule. You're right there. You're right on the cusp. Yeah, you're probably going on the road that first game, but 9-3, that's, I mean, if this makes you feel any better, that's my right now. I mean, we'll see what things look like. I'll be a lot more confident in it after fall camp about where I stand. But yeah, 9-3 is what I've got.
No, that makes me feel better, honestly, and I think some OU fans, some are going to take that as a slight. It's not.
No,
It's trying to be realistic about what you're walking into.
a 9-3 season in the SEC right now versus a 10-2 season last year in what the Big 12 was, way, way, way different. Like way
Yes,
different. Not even close to the same caliber of team. If you go 9-3, I mean, you're setting yourself up for some crazy success in the future.
absolutely. And we'll talk a lot more about OU in future pods, and we've got a couple other teams to get to, so we'll
Yep.
get to them. But the last thing I'll say is I like what you said about tiers, and I think the first 3 or 4 teams we mentioned kind of belong in a tier, and then you mentioned OU and a few other teams that
Yeah.
are kind of in a tier below them. That's
Yeah.
not to say any of those teams couldn't win the SEC.
No,
I
not at
think
all.
OU I think belongs in that second tier with a high ceiling and an unknown floor.
Correct.
Is that fair to say? Would you
Yep.
agree with that?
100%. Every one of those teams I mentioned has the capacity of surprising and playing up to themselves up into that first tier easily.
Yep. You've got the 6th overall pick, Georgia, Texas, Bama, Ole Miss, OU off the board. Number 6, your 4th pick, I believe. Or wait, no, it's
your
my
third
pick.
Your
Oh
third
shoot,
pick.
it's my pick. So I was trying to get out of making this pick because this is a really difficult pick. Gone through the teams, Brian. You mentioned I think there's 4 teams that are all kind of clumped together outside of that top 4. I think I'm going to go Tennessee. I think I'm going to go Tennessee with the 6th pick. There's a Tennessee team that it just feels, I hate it because I want to bring objective analysis. And if you look at the objective analysis part of it, they bring back a really good offensive line. They bring back several starters. Dylan Sampson is a really good running back. They've got a really experienced group of wide receivers. The defense was sneakily pretty good last year. And I think there's reason to be confident they can be even better this year. I think that's the main question mark is their defense. And you look at, I think their only real question offensively is Nico Lamaliva, who look, we haven't seen him. We haven't seen him a ton, but he played really well in the Citrus Bowl, won MVP in that game.
Against a good Iowa defense.
Yep, exciting young player. I think he's kind of like Jackson Arnold, not comparing, but like basically one career start, but young guy with a lot of potential, but a huge responsibility. That's a question mark. That's the objective analysis. The subjective analysis is this feels like a Tennessee team that's had the pieces for a while. Is this the year Josh Heupel puts it together?
Yeah.
And I think it could be. So I'm going to take Tennessee with the 6th pick. Anything to add on that pick?
James Pierce is really good at football. That's somebody that that's one of those players that can fix a lot of issues defensively. Like just having him on the field makes a huge difference. So I like that pick. I don't have any issues with that.
You've got the 7th overall pick in this draft. Your 4th pick. Who are you going with? I know it's this middle tier is where it gets hard.
Yeah.
So
And
You tell me.
I don't really like, I mean, I don't know. I'm picking it because this schedule is incredibly easy. There's not a whole lot of analysis here. Um, Missouri returns 9 offensive starters. They should be favored in 10 games. Um, yeah, I, I mean, they're going to Tuscaloosa. They get a bye week and then they play Oklahoma. I think they could I would project them right now. I would say they lose both of those games and win the rest of them.
Yeah.
I'd say they're probably 10-2. Um, if OU had this schedule with Missouri flipped for Oklahoma on if OU had this schedule, um, I mean they may have been knocking on the door of being right there with Georgia for like 1A, 1B on just where they project. It's cake.
This Miss
It's Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, Vanderbilt, at Texas A&M, at Massachusetts, Auburn, at Alabama, bye week, Oklahoma, at South Carolina, at Mississippi State, Arkansas. That's 10 wins. Like, yeah.
it's about as easy as it gets in the SEC,
Yep.
right?
Correct.
And look, Missouri was really good last year, and they return a lot of guys.
Yep.
I mean, they went 11-2, man.
Yep.
They went 11-2 and beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl.
Yep.
Now, obviously, but still, they finished 11-2. So you're going with Mr. Cargo,
Yep.
Cargo guy, Cargo shorts,
Yep.
drink wits.
Yeah.
The main storyline to keep there is there's a certain offensive lineman, there's a certain lineman playing for Missouri that could be at Oklahoma.
Don't recall. Have no idea what we're talking about.
Can't think of him. That'll be interesting, but yeah. Again, I think they belong in this tier of maybe not quite at the top, but could play themselves there. And that schedule it's cupcake schedule by SEC standards.
Looking forward to that trip to Columbia.
That's gonna be fun, man.
Yep.
That's gonna be really, really fun. Is it on me to make another pick then?
It is you.
It's me. All right.
At least you're at the back end of this tier, so it's a pretty easy pick at this point.
Yeah, I was gonna say with the number 8 pick, I'm gonna go with the Louisiana State University Tigers. Now, LSU, I think, is a really interesting team to try to evaluate.
Yep.
Because, I mean, look, you're trying to replace the Heisman Trophy winner. It's going to be really hard. This is an LSU team that were they the best offense in the country last year? I think they were. Or certainly one of in terms of points per game. They were putting up points on everybody.
Yep.
And look, you're bringing in look, there's a couple of things. One, their defense was not great, and that's the reason why they didn't make more noise, because their offense was incredible. Their defense wasn't very good. I don't know what to expect out of that defense this year. I mean, I really don't know. And then offensively, look, you've got Garrett Nussmeier as your new quarterback. I think there's a lot of excitement about him. I think there are people who are really excited about his potential. But again, what do we really know about him? I mean, I think there's just question marks about this team. And I think when I said OU had a really high ceiling and an unknown floor, I think LSU arguably has not the highest ceiling, but I think they have the biggest difference between their ceiling and their floor of almost any team in the SEC.
Correct.
Because the other part of it is I think they're 10th in the country in returning production on offense.
Yeah.
Their offense should still be really, really good. But you're replacing your star quarterback, and your defense probably isn't going to be very good. So, like, to me, LSU feels primed to be like 8-4 with the potential to finish with 9 wins, maybe.
Yeah, like 8-4 and beating Alabama but losing to Florida. Like that, like just very inconsistent but a very difficult team. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
No,
Um,
that's anything to add on the LSU pick.
yeah, I cannot wait to watch them play USC in Las Vegas.
Oh, that's
To
gonna be
open up
fun.
the season. I like Brian Kelly. So I that's a guy that he wins. He wins football games. So um good pick.
He does, and I'll just say again because I will do that this coming year. I will write a column. I didn't do it last year. I can't remember if I said it or not, but Jaden Daniels is who I voted for, officially voted for the Heisman Trophy.
Good pick.
Um, he was really good,
Yep.
and he's gonna be hard to replace. Okay, this is, I believe, we're at number 9, and this is when
Yes.
things start to drop off a little bit. You've got the
Yeah.
ninth pick. Who are you going with?
This one, so this is between two teams. I'm gonna go Florida here.
Ooh, okay, I
Um,
like it.
Now I'm taking Florida while ignoring the schedule because the schedule for the Gators is incredible. Have you gone down the list? All right, let me enlighten you. They open up the season against Miami. And then you got
Mhm.
Samford. You play Texas A&M week 3. You go to at Mississippi State week 4, and you have a bye week. Not bad so far. You got US or UCF week in October. Then you go to Tennessee, and then you host Kentucky before your second bye week. This is where it gets insane. This 5-game stretch is like, I say this wholeheartedly, not over exaggerating. This is probably the most difficult 5-week stretch that any team in college football has ever had. Ever.
I love it.
Georgia at Texas, LSU, Ole Miss at Florida State. That
Yeah,
is insane.
yeah.
That's like you could go 1-4 and in that stretch and feel like good about things. Like
Yeah.
it's gonna be so tough. So Graham Mertz was better than expected last year. There's not a lot of people on the Billy Napier train still. I still like the fit. I just don't know if he's gonna get a chance to really build there the way that he had hoped. I kind of hope that he does get that chance, but it's just a gauntlet, man. I mean, it's the hardest schedule in college football, period. And so if this team, do you follow K Ford on Twitter? The K Ford or the Kelly Ford ratings?
Yeah.
Um, they did this really interesting table this week about how many wins a team would need to be a serious uh, contender for an at-large bid in the college football playoff. Florida was on a tier of its own at 8 wins. If they were to go 8-4 by the Kelly Ford metrics, they would be a serious contender for one of those at-large bids. That's how tough the schedule is. So, yep,
If you want to feel better about OU schedule,
just
look at that 5-game schedule. It's five
right.
game part of Florida schedule. I
Yep,
like the pick, and I like it because I think from odds maker standpoints, I think people are a little down on Florida and see them as being in the bottom 6, but I like the pick. I do. And look, if they get out of that 5-game stretch 3-2, even,
man.
all of a sudden you're looking at, are they going to finish with 10 wins? We'll see.
Yep.
I like the pick. I guess it's me for the next pick
Yes, sir.
and the 10th pick. And you know what? I'm going to do it not for the meme because I take this very seriously, but I'm going to go Texas A&M here.
That's who I had. Yep.
I'm going to go A&M because I think it's just clear that Jimbo Fisher's time at A&M had far run its course. And the amount of talent that A&M had continued to bring in and did relatively nothing with it is sort of astounding when you really think about it. Mike Elko is a hell of a coach. Did a really good job at Duke.
Yes, he is.
And look, they've got new coaches in place. Um, I think they're kind of a hard team to judge, but Texas A&M has had talent.
Yep.
That's never been the problem in College Station. It just hasn't
They
been.
yeah, they returned 18 starters. So they held on to who they needed to hold on to. And Mike Elko Mike Elko easily has his most talented roster as a head coach.
Yeah.
So,
And he did a
who-
lot with Duke. I
correct.
mean, he made Duke into a respectable program, and Duke it
Yes.
was for a very long time not a respectable program.
Right.
I like A&M as not to win the SEC, but I like them as a sleeper pick to maybe pull off an upset or two this year.
Ruin somebody's season.
Yeah, I like
Perhaps
that. Uh,
Texas's.
maybe Tech. Oh man, that's going to be a hell of a game, isn't
I
it?
can't
Texas,
wait to
Texas
watch
A&M.
that.
I
Oh, I cannot
cannot
wait to
wait.
watch that.
All right, number 11. This is when we start getting into some of the tough parts that I don't know if every team necessarily needs to be discussed at length. There's really only a couple of teams in this bottom section here that I want to spend a ton of time on, but you've got the 11th pick. Who you going with?
Gamecocks. Going
I like it.
Shane Beamer. I think they're going to be better. I like Sellers. I like the quarterback that they've got coming in. I think they're really excited about him. Defensively, they seem to feel like they're going to be a lot better. So, and Beamer is just he's one of my favorite coaches out there. I love how he runs that program. He's 20-18 as the head coach there. So it's been tough, but he's found a way to be above 500. And I think this is a team that's going to win a bowl. I think they're going to make a bowl game. I think that might be I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but their schedule is manageable. It's
Mhm.
tough, but they've got Old Dominion, Kentucky, LSU, Akron. 3 game stretch in the middle is tough. They've got Mississippi at Alabama at OU, but then they finish with A&M, Vanderbilt, Missouri, Wofford, Clemson. So I think they could make it work. They were 5-7 last year. I think they could make 6-6 work. So I'll take them.
No, I like that, and it'll be fun to see Beamer back in Norman. That's
Yeah.
going to be fun.
Yep.
I'm gonna go. I've got the 12th pick, and I'm gonna go with Auburn here.
Okay.
I think that's the natural pick here in terms of where we've gone so far. I do think they did a pretty good job around the margins, getting some talent, and I think the main reason that I think last year could have been better is that Peyton Thorne at quarterback just wasn't he was fine, but not great. And I think they thought they were getting a better quarterback than they did because Peyton Thorne was a solid quarterback at Michigan
Yeah.
State.
Yeah.
And last year, I'm looking at his stats. 1,755 yards passing, 61% completion rate, 16 touchdowns, 10 picks. Just not going to get it done consistently enough in the SEC, but he is a 5th-year starter, presumably. I think if he can play better, if he can play like he showed at Michigan State, I think Auburn could be a sneaky good team. If not, I think they're going to be probably a bottom dweller. So,
Yeah.
I mean that, but
I think they're probably a year away. I would say they're probably a year away from being a team that could really hurt some feelings. I guess is
yeah.
probably the best way of putting it.
All right, the 13th pick.
Yeah, this is probably like one of my favorite value picks at where I'm getting them is Kentucky. Um, Brock
Yeah,
Vandergriff. Most people don't realize Brock Vandergriff, who a lot of people recognize that name and for good reason, is actually set to be the starter at Kentucky this year. They returned 10 starters defensively, 8 starters around Vandergriff coming back from last year. They went 7-6. Their schedule's tough, but I think if there's anybody that's proven consistent in the SEC, it's Mark Stoops. So, um, yeah,
That might be the steal of the draft, getting him with the 13th pick.
yeah,
Honestly,
yeah.
I think you may have won the draft with getting Kentucky at 13. Really good pick. I've got one of my 14 going through my list here. There's only three teams left on the board. That's Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Vanderbilt. I guess by process of elimination, I'm going to go Arkansas. Um, if nothing else, kind of for the meme of it, because Arkansas is just an absolute chaos. I mean, what a mess in Fayetteville, Arkansas, man. Um, I mean, last year was horribly disappointing. Bobby Petrino,
Let's go. Time to
Bobby
ride.
Petrino coming in. Um, Look, they've got new pieces. They've basically got a new staff, except, I mean, Sam Pittman is still there, but think he's more than on the hot seat. He's on the lava seat, I
Right.
think, in Fayetteville. And this is a team that I think had a lot of excitement a few years ago, and now they don't. They've got no momentum. So I mean, would they go in the SEC last year? I think they went 1-7. I
Yeah.
just, I think Arkansas, only because the two teams, you could have gone with another pick here, but I'm going to let you take away the 15th pick because this is a team I do want to say something about. So go ahead. You've got the 15th pick.
Yeah. Mississippi State is next. I mean, I'm excited. I'm excited to see what Jeff Levy can do there. I think it's interesting that he is the guy that, I know that there was a sandwich year there where, um, they had to replace Mike Leach after he, tragically passed away. But I think it is interesting that a guy with air raid principles is taking over a program a couple of years after the guy who, him and Hal Mummy together, those two are pretty much who you think of whenever you think of air raid. So I think it's interesting that he's taken over the program there. I don't know what you would deem a success in year one with the schedule that they've got. It's going to be tough, but I don't know. I think it's just a tough situation. Blake Shapen from Baylor coming in as the starter there doesn't exactly give me a ton of confidence. It's just tough. It's going to be a really tough season in Starkville, but I think uh, if there's a guy that can get things figured out on the offensive side of the ball, I think it's Levy. So I guess we'll just have to see.
I don't really have a ton to add to what you said, other than I think this is just to note that while I think most coaches have aspirations of becoming a head football coach, and regardless of the struggles at Mississippi State, if you're a head football coach in the SEC, that's a big move. It's big time.
Yep.
That means you're one of the marquee names in football, and I think OU fans are going to be very, very interested to see what he does in Mississippi State. Having said that, he faces more than an uphill climb to make Mississippi State relevant. And there is absolutely all kinds of scenarios where this torpedoes, where
Yep.
they go 4-8 this year, and next year they go 5-7.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is
Might
not
be being generous a little bit.
that might, yes. Yeah. And this is risky. What Jeff Lebby leaving for Mississippi State is incredibly risky.
Yeah.
Take away the criticisms at OU, and I think that marriage had run its course. I mean, I mean, they're going to give him some time because they know their Mississippi State's not going to become a contender. But I mean, how much better are they going to get in 3 years? He's got a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do.
Yeah, that's a tough spot, man. I mean, that's a that and Vanderbilt is, unless you're a baseball coach, it's pretty tough going out there. So,
I've got the obvious 16th. You got the obvious first pick. I get the obvious 16th pick. And that would be Vanderbilt. Sorry, Vanderbilt. I don't really have that much to. OU and Texas joining the conference doesn't help you.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Good luck. Good luck, Vanderbilt. So,
Well,
Brian,
it
after.
it, it does. It brings more money in.
Oh, yeah.
But at some point they're going to have to start, spending that on the football facility. Anyways, go ahead.
Not more wins. It brings more
No,
money, but it doesn't bring more wins.
no more happiness, just more green.
So after all of that, Brian, here's our final list: Georgia, Texas, Bama, Ole Miss, OU, Tennessee, Missouri, LSU, Florida, Texas A&M, Auburn, Kentucky, Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Vanderbilt. And I do think you got to steal the draft of Kentucky at the 13 spot. Honestly, I think you and I had 3 and 4 flip flopped, but I
Yeah.
think for the most part, I think it feels like we saw eye to eye for the most part.
Yeah.
I
Well, you
think
know what to say.
Hmm. they say, um, they say something.
Georgia
We f-
won, Vandy 16. The rest will
and
figure themselves out.
we finish each other's sandwiches.
Sandwiches. That's what I was going
Sandwich.
to say.
You were
Yeah.
gonna say that. Brian, I think that is going to do it for us here on another episode of the Oklahoma Drill. This was fun. I think we should do more fun stuff like this, more draft
Agreed.
style, more gimmicky. I like this. This was fun. OU at number 5 in our draft. I think it's gonna be fun to revisit this in a few months.
Yeah.
But until then, if you're not a VIP member over at ouinsider.com, make sure to head over there. If you're not, subscribe to this YouTube channel. Make sure to like and subscribe. All kinds of content. Football season just a few weeks away. No better time to join in than right now. Till then, thank you guys for listening to the Oklahoma Drill. We'll see you next time.